In this question, we are going to be filling out table of values and also graphing the basic toolkit functions that you need to know. Okay, so what are they? When you look at the different graphs that you can construct in MyOpenMath, the ones that you need to know is number one, a line. So we need any 2 points to graph a line. Number two, a parabola. A parabola has to have a vertex and one other point. So usually that would be x squared. If you see x squared and no other terms are higher than that, higher power than that, that's a parabola. Now this guy right here is like a parabola, but it's only half of it, and it's turned 90 degrees clockwise. This is called square root. So this is square root. And then finally, this V shape here, this is called absolute value. So you need to know when you look at the formula what it is. Okay, so let's start with f of x equals -3. So this is actually what we call a constant function. This is a function that doesn't change. It's like stupid function because anytime you plug in something, it just says -3. It's like a parrot, always says -3. You say hello, it says -3. You say goodbye, it says -3. So no matter what, it says -3. This is a constant function. So when you want to fill out the table of values, it gives you the same thing, -3 all the time. Okay, so let's graph it. So first of all, we need to make sure which of the options we need to graph here. Well, this is just a line. It's going to be a horizontal line. So we use the default, which is the line tool, and we want to graph any two of these points. So for example, -1, -3. So -1, that means 1 to the left, 3 down, that would be 1 point. And the other one would be 1, -3. So this is where every time it's just -3, it's flat. Okay, let's go to x. So hopefully you understand that this is, by the way, also called an identity function because it just gives you back the same number you give it. Like you give it -1, it says, okay, -1, thank you. Give it 0, it gives you 0. Give it 1, it gives you 1. So it just parrots out like whatever you tell, it just repeats it for you. Okay, so let's see if we can graph it. So this is still a line, so we use the line tool, and 0, 0, 1, 1. Okay, that's your y equals x, so f of x equals x. Now, this one is a parabola. How do I know that? Because x is squared. Now, what happens here? Well, when you square a negative number, you need to understand that the square goes away. So this is actually a typical problem that some students, and not just students, but a lot of people make a mistake here. When they plug in -1 for x, they get -1. So because what they're typing is this, and it gives them -1. But remember, when you plug in any number, you always put it in parentheses. This is just good practice. So this is actually wrong because you need to put the -1 itself in parentheses and then square that. What does that mean? It's just -1 multiplied by -1, which is +1. It's not 1. It's not -1, it's +1. Okay, so this is 1. So x squared, the output of x squared can never be a negative answer. 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1. Okay, so let's see if we can graph it. So first, again, we need to decide what is it going to look like. Well, it's going to look like a parabola, and we need to get a vertex. Now, vertex of x squared, and more on that later in the course, is at 0, 0. So that's the most important point you need first, 0, 0. And it also goes through 1, 1. And I could have chosen -1, 1, but I just chose 1, 1. So that's your parabola. Finally, the absolute value. What does that do? Absolute value gives you the distance from a number to the origin. It is always a positive answer or a 0. So, for example, if I want to compute -1 absolute value, what is that? That's the distance from -1 to 0. Well, that's just 1. So the answer is we just drop the negative. 0, what's the distance from 0 to 0? That's just 0. The distance from 1 to the origin is 1. Okay, but again, you need to realize this is absolute value and it looks like a V shape. So you use that. So 0, 0 is like that vertex of the U shape. V shape thing. Okay, so that's going to be your absolute value. Oh, there is one more square root, forgot about that. So as you can see, the x values here start at 0. There are no negative values. Why is that? Because square root of a negative number is undefined when you limit yourself to just real numbers. So square root of 0 is 0. If you're not sure, just use a calculator. Open the calculator under resources. And if you want to know what is square root of 0, just enter it right here and it'll tell you that's 0. So square root of 0 is 0. Square root of 1 is 1. If you want square root of 4, it's 2. Okay, so for the square root, it's just like a parabola, but you turn it and it's only half of it. So we use this right here. Where does the square root start? At 0, 0. So it starts here, and it also goes through 1, 1. It, by the way, also goes through 4, 2, but we don't need that anymore.